Yeah, good. Brilliant. Excellent. Okay, Barbara, we're in the second sections of this interview from you in San Diego. Right, okay. You wanted to talk about hybrids. Tell us about hybrids.
Well, the hybrids, I think, is a very wonderful subject and a very important subject. I think we may have more hybrids, that is, extraterrestrial beings combined physically, genetically, with human beings. So I just call them ET human hybrids. And so I've done quite a study and continue to do so about these ET human hybrids living on Earth. So these are people who have been born through mothers on Earth, human mothers. They've been born the regular way that all of our mothers give birth to babies, and they are brought up in human families. However, what all of them, all the ones I know, all of them did not know until they were nearly grown up, or some of them were actually grown up. They did not know that they were ET human hybrids. But from the very earliest days, these beings felt really different than everyone they saw around them. They even felt very different than everyone in their family. And sometimes they would say to their parents, "You're not my real parents. My real parents are out there. I don't know where, but they're not here on Earth. I'm not really from here." Now, of course, parents were not exactly what you'd call happy to hear that from their child. And when they would have playmates, they would feel really, really different than all those other children, really different from all the children who were in school with them. And that kind of difference, even very different from their own siblings, although they looked like and behaved like regular human children. And they also had another thing in common, which is that they had frequent visits from extraterrestrial beings. And they really enjoyed these visits, as opposed to many children who were terrified by alien beings coming into their room at night. These hybrids actually learned to like and love these beings who would come and take them away. And when they would bring them back to their homes, the children would have that sense that they had just had a really rewarding, wonderful experience, even if they couldn't remember many of the details. So these hybrids grew up, and one way or another, eventually, they learned that indeed they were hybrids, and they learned how they became hybridized. So to kind of encapsulate this quickly, most of them were made hybrids before they were even conceived, or right early in the conception process.
Now, this is very important because this is something which John Irwin's referred to, and he's referred to the right kind of soul going into the right kind of human body. And if it's not right, you have lots of problems because the soul seems to be programmed for that particular kind of body. So what you're saying is very, very important. So they must be somehow prepared for the differences that they're going to encounter.
They must, especially in the case of the reptilians, and also in the case of some of the other dimensional beings, who are not dense and physical in the sense that we are. So there must be special accommodations made so that an other dimensional being could combine genetically, reproductively with a three-dimensional human being. Anyway, it does seem to work. We don't know all the technology that they use, but they apparently do use it. So the mothers who were carrying the hybrid children. In all the cases that I know about, they were not aware that the baby they were carrying was a hybrid, because in a state in which they were not conscious, the mothers were taken early in the pregnancy with a regular human child, regular mother, regular father, and they were taken, and then material was added to the embryo, the extraterrestrial genetic information or material was added, and in some cases several different kinds of extraterrestrial genetics were injected into the fetus, and then the fetus was replaced back in the mother's body, and the pregnancy continued, went full term, normal birth, and raising of that child. And in a couple of cases that I know of, the mothers were taken later in the pregnancy, maybe 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, depending. And then while they were on board the ship, lying on a medical type table, that they were injected with genetics from these other species through the wall of the abdomen, the wall of the uterus, and into the fetus. All of this injection happening by an extraterrestrial being. So it seemed like it was very deliberate that this particular mother was chosen, and some of those mothers happened to already be experiencers of extraterrestrial contact, and in other cases they do not, as far as they know, have the history of being an extraterrestrial experiencer. So anyway, these processes were done, and the babies were carried full term, born and raised here as regular humans. When they found out, each of the hybrids whom I have worked closely with, when they eventually, in their adult years, found out that they were a hybrid, each one independently said, "Oh, I was so relieved, because I always felt so different, and I always welcomed and enjoyed those beings who would come to me in the middle of the night or whenever they came, and I always felt a kinship with them, and it didn't make any sense. And nobody here on earth ever knew what I was talking about, even my own family. So what a relief that I know what this is all about. This is why I have felt this way." Also, all of these hybrids have had, from the very earliest ages, a lot of very wonderful abilities, psychic abilities. So they can do telepathic communication, and they usually don't find many other humans they can do that with, but occasionally they can, and it's a relief.
What about other animals? I mean, probably more telepathic with the animals than the other humans.
Oh, and yes, thank you for mentioning that, because all of these hybrids have a wonderful relationship with animals. Some of them are actually professional animal communicators.
In other words, the animal knows it can talk to the dumb humans.
Yes, that most humans don't get it, what they're trying to communicate, or we guess, and if we're lucky, we hit the mark. But they love being able to communicate with humans. So this could be other dogs or other cats or reptilian type pets, or it could be deer in the forest or lambs or cows or lions or tigers in a zoo. It could be any type of animal that these people can really communicate with.
Well,
and what blessing.
That what I'm looking at here is ancient human history. There was a case in Birmingham brought up to us by a guy we call him the Coincidence Man, and he referred to a group of grey type humans They were very weak. They very quite small, but actually lived as a family, and they had previously come from an ancient race of proper humans. And I'm saying this in this climate of we're facing today of sort of transhumanization and humanity facing alteration into cyborgs. I mean, this is in the mainstream film media now. But one of the messages from that human, which is possibly a survivor from the old wars, and what I'm trying to get at here is the ability of the animals to be with us, but also communicate with the reptilians on that very point. So that would infer that the reptilians maybe have been here before, or are as terrestrial as we are in that sense.
Oh, it could be. I mean, there are theories that they were here long before humans. There are a lot of theories out there about reptilians, and some do feel that they were here millennia before humans. And I think it's just great that because of people's experiences, nowadays we can learn so much more about this. I think that it would be excellent if more and more humans were interested in this whole subject. Many millions and billions of people are not, but more and more of us are. And I think the more that we know about this, the better, and the more that we are open to even the idea that there are many, many beings, different kinds of beings in the cosmos, and there is a lot of interaction between some of those beings and human beings. I'd like to add, too, that in the book that Miguel Mendonça and I wrote called Meet the Hybrids, we have featured 8 real-life human ET hybrids and have learned so much from them. Some of these hybrids have quite a good proportion of reptilian species in them, in their hybrid mixture. And some of them have been known to what we call shapeshift into their full temporary reptilian form. And I have seen, in 2 cases, I've actually watched the eyes of 2 women, different occasions, even being in different countries, different years, but I've watched the eyes change from the round pupil and irises that we all have as humans, change into the vertical slit type pupil, the reptilian eye type of pupil. Now, with these 2 particular women, when I mentioned it to them that I was watching this happen, I asked, first of all, before mentioning it, I said, "Are you aware of any different sensations in your eyes right now, by any chance?" Not wanting to prejudice the question. And in one case, she had no realization of it at all. With the other woman, she said simply, "Well, I feel kind of a pressure in my eyes." And I said, "Well, I am actually standing here about a foot away from her face. I am actually watching your pupils change into the oblong, the vertical pupils." And she went rushing into the ladies' room and took a look to get validation of that herself. Now, she is a person who has already had experiences of shape-shifting into her full reptilian form. And she shared a room one night at a conference with another ET human hybrid who, while she was sleeping, the roommate, transformed, as she was sleeping peacefully, transformed into her full reptilian form, even with a large reptilian tail.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the tail, for God's sake. Where do you put the tail? I mean, no matter what kind of suit you're going to wear, Barbara, I mean, no matter what dress you wear, where do you put that tail?
Well, especially if you're wearing trousers, that would be, if you had a nice full skirt, that wouldn't be too much of a problem. But
We're getting into awkward territory here. Trying to put some levity into this situation.
yeah, but there's actually no problem with that because with the temporary transforming or morphing into the reptilian form, the person suddenly does not have clothing on. So all the reptilian textured skin is showing. So there's nothing restricting the tail. But then they morph back, shapeshift back into their human form.
Well, we had one particular case where the individual actually boasted that you could see her light body tail.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there is.
So maybe that's there all the time. It's just whatever. Do they have some kind of projection device that they use when it runs out of batteries or gets interference?
Yeah. Well, it could be that aura cameras might pick that up. In those aura photos, you see the colors around the head and the shoulders. So I don't know of that having happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if the aura camera, which is picking up frequencies, and frequencies have color, each frequency has a different color.
You mentioned in your last interview with Kerry Cassidy, and I'd be very fortunate to talk with Kerry Cassidy coming up in a week's time and speaking at one of our conferences here. And we had a good time here in Wiltshire with a tour in the last couple of weeks. But you did mention there about Peter Paget, Peter Paget mentioned you in an interview I did with Peter Paget. With a Kerry Cassidy interview, mentioned you in a book with interpretation with alien languages of some kind. Could you talk more about that?
Yes, well, that was back in a book, my first book that was published in 2001 called Crop Circles Revealed. It was all about the crop circle phenomenon. And my co-author, Judith Moore, did a lot of channeling. She was channeling from allegedly an 11th dimensional being named Leolin, and Leolin would channel through Judith Moore about the whole crop circle phenomenon and about 67 individual crop circles. This happened over a period of about a year and a half that Judith was receiving these transmissions. Now, the transmissions were so complicated in terms of scientific verbiage that Judith and I just had no way to understand. And even other scientists we would show it to would say, well, I think this means such and such. But anyway, Judith had met Peter Paget or had heard of him at the time. So now we're talking about the year 2000. And
I think he'd spoken at Mesquite. Had he spoken at the UFO Congress then?
I think he probably had. I know he did. So Judith asked Peter Paget to take some of this material that we didn't understand and to glean it down, to translate it into everyday terms that we could use in the book, Crop Circles Revealed, so that a reader would be able to read about this crop circle and understand what it was all about. So that was wonderful. Peter, I believe, volunteered to help with that, and that was a very significant help. We've appreciated that greatly ever since. Yeah, but that is very interesting that his being a hybrid might very well as being a brilliant human. I think he is a very brilliant human, but the hybrid part might enable him to be able to understand those terms that another species is using.
Now, it's interesting on that point that book you're talking about, now, there was an English edition or a UK European edition, but apparently the American edition didn't contain some of that information. Is that right?
Well, the American did. Yes, the American version does. It's still being published, still being ordered on Amazon. yeah, that it still does contain.
No, I thought you mentioned a long time ago the original edition didn't contain the Judith Moore section because it was too controversial. The publisher turned it down.
Well, when we first were writing the book and having a lot of discussions with our publisher, which was Light Technology Publishing, they said, this is not going to be understandable by human beings. Could you simplify it down into verbiage that humans can understand? So it was after that that Judith enlisted the help of Peter Paget. So by the time it was published, that more complicated explanation for the crop circles was not published, actually, ever. But by the time our book, Crop Circles Revealed, was published, it was in the more simplified form. So it's very high information, but it's in language that we can understand, even if we're not scientists.
Yeah, I'm going to say something really controversial. We know a lot of these things, a lot of them are made by people, but it's and I mean, you've worked with Matthew Williams. I know you got into trouble with that with certain conference organizations. When you say Matt, you worked, but you had a civilized conversation with him.
But I've had conversations with him,
yes.
Yeah,
I mean, I think the key that he's talked about is that the circle makers themselves, who are making them with their boards and their planks, it's not the mechanism of how the formations are put down, it's where and the design. And it's my personal beef with this is people are missing the point that humans are being accessed. The mechanism of how to put down is being accessed. These people are somehow getting these ideas and putting them in. They might be the authors, but they're not the originators. And U.S. Air Force intelligence seems to have got in there as well.
Oh, yeah. What do they say about this?
Well, there's a guy here called Richard D. Hall tracked down one of the circle makers who I think wrote the book and the film The Mirage Men. Are you familiar with that? And I think he's by the name of Lundberg, one of the circle makers.
Yes, I've heard of him.
Yes, and he was he was outed as MI5, but he was responsible, trained up by MI5 to author the circles properly. In other words, when he got the data, they wanted somebody who would accurately put that on the field, and some of that data came from U.S. Air Force intelligence.
Well, you see, I think that some of these beings who actually create in the ethers, so to speak, they create the idea, they create the information. I think, so these are off-planet intelligences we're talking about. And I think that it's very true that they sometimes communicate with some humans who are geared and ready to go out into the fields and make a crop circle. And so and Matthew Williams and some of the others too I've talked to over quite a number of years now, probably 26 years, they have said on occasion that they are receiving an inspiration, they know not from where, but receiving an inspiration to go out and make a particular pattern. Now, when we look into this further, that inspiration comes from off-planet, some intelligence that wants to get certain information and certain frequencies here on the earth. So they inspire these humans who like to go out in the middle of the night with their planks and ropes and boards to make the crop circle. That's one of the ways I believe that crop circles are made. I personally still think that the majority of crop circles are made directly by another force coming from somewhere else. It could be a ball of light, it could be just an energy wave, it could be all kinds of things. And humans with their planks and ropes could be, I think, are one of the ways. About 2 years ago, or maybe 3, I met with a young man near the barge inn. He lived right near the barge inn. And I met him at the barge. And he was showing me a whole portfolio full of crop circle pictures. Some were drawings, some were done in ink on white paper, various ways, some were colored in. And he said that they were transmissions that he had received alone in meditation with the direction to make sure that those patterns were made as crop circles. And he said, I have no way of verifying this, but he said that those patterns had previously been made as crop circles. And he showed me a transmission of a design that was going to be made that night. And lo and behold, the next morning, the first crop circle that we heard about was that particular pattern. It was a triangle pattern with a circle at each end and a couple of different features at Oliver's Castle on top of the hill. And we rushed over, and sure enough, there was that pattern that allegedly had not been there the day before. So I think that was a trustworthy indication that that particular group of young men had gone out and made that crop circle. I'm very interested in that, and I'm even more interested, of course, in the ones that, as far as we can tell, are not made by people, but are made in these other unusual ways, sort of more paranormal ways.
Well, somebody you probably haven't heard of, a guy called Simon Miles. He spoke at my conference 2 years ago, and he also spoke at the Francis Bacon Society as well. Very intricate on... I do some work for the Francis Bacon Society, and they do some... I mean, if you want conspiracies, go back to Elizabeth I and Francis Bacon. It makes 9/11 look like a walk in the park. But crucially, up at Barbary Castle, he actually spoke at the Coronation Hall last year when they first held Nancy Poulet and her friend Roland Bajan are holding a conference every year now. Yeah, and yes. I think Simon spoke there very briefly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. That was I had known of him.
Yeah, and that fascinating that a whole series of crop circles in the area of Barbary Castle over like 18 years on different locations and fields all interconnect with a much larger, more complex design, which is a sacred symbol of a candelabra in at least 3 dimensions. And each aspect of those independent crop circles made by under different circumstances all exactly line up.
Well, that's a wonderful contribution. And of course, there was in 1999, I believe, that wonderful menorah candelabra pattern at Barbary Castle in the field.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that it connected. Yeah, and that was part of a much.
That was a beauty.
Yeah,
I spent hours in that crop circles.
Well, I've just come from there this afternoon, and the barge is there, changed owners and stuff like that. But that's a little bit of inside information. It's owned by Italians now, but. It's really good to see you again, and we've interviewed. It's just wonderful. You're looking fantastic, Barbara. It's really good to see. What further things do you want to say about these hybrids? And you've really focused on the reptilians. I mean, we need to talk about the other things later on. I know you've got company shortly, but what's the sort of thing you want to say to round off this time?
Well, the hybrid, the whole subject of hybrids, ET human hybrids, I think is highly significant, because not only is it really indicating to us from their personal lives, their personal experiences, that many of these other species, very intelligent, very talented species, do exist in the universe, and they do come here to quite an amazing extent to Earth. They do it very clandestinely, so they will not be harassed, killed, captured, whatever. At least I think that's a good reason to come in a very low-key, private kind of way. But they also are really adding a lot to humanity. They're working through certain humans, whom we consider ET human hybrids, to advance humanity, to help humanity, to help upgrade the consciousness of human beings. So I know about a number of human ET hybrids who are living in America, and several living in England, but no doubt there are ET human hybrid people living in many countries of the world. And many of them are probably doing more or less the kind of thing that our hybrids are doing, which is really helping to raise the consciousness, helping people to become more positive, more spiritual, more aware of the cosmos, more aware of accepting that there's all kinds of life out there that usually people don't talk about very much, or they sensationalize it in movies and television series. But there's a lot of good out there, and there's a lot of concern on many of these ET species about humanity. They're very interested in planet Earth. With all the planets that there are, Earth is truly unique. I had one extraterrestrial, through channeling, tell me that many of the species out there are so interested in Earth because we have more species of life and subspecies and subspecies than all of the other planets that have life combined have life. We have more life on
that's a heck of a thing to say.
All the other cosmos. And we have human beings who for millennia have had a lot of influences genetically from many of the extraterrestrial species. So probably all of us humans are actually hybrids to some extent without realizing it. And then the ones that are living here now as hybrids, we're getting to know more about this entire program that's been going on. From our perspective, it seems like forever. Yeah, there's a lot going on, not only in the world, which of course gets our attention more than anything, but a lot going on in the whole cosmos. There's a whole huge history of life in the cosmos. It's quite staggering, really.
Well, how do you think we're going to tell people that? I mean, we've got certain groups pushing for disclosure. I mean, are we just going to do it ourselves, have to push it ourselves?
Oh, good for you. That's what I've been thinking for several years now, that we may or may not ever get official government disclosure from one country or another. We don't know. It hasn't happened yet. But what we do know is that people like you, people like me, speaking publicly, doing your film work, which is excellent, conferences, meetings, MUFON groups, all kinds of UFO groups all over, that more and more people are becoming aware of this whole phenomenon. So as I have found myself saying in lectures for the past 2 or 3 years, every now and then, I say, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to wait for official disclosure because we are the disclosure.
Yeah.
In fact, my co-author, Miguel Mendonça, from your country, England, wonderful man, wonderful author. After we wrote Meet the Hybrids, he went on to write 2 other books. He's working on a 3rd one. And that 3rd book is called We Are the Disclosure. Interviewing many, many people who know so many aspects of this whole ET human phenomenon. and are right out there taking their chances like this, interviews, all kinds of programs, films, conference lectures, writing, books, articles, internet. So it's growing, that more and more people at least have the opportunity to learn about this. And many people are.
Now, we earlier talked just really briefly in closing, FREE. Now, that's a group, Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Experiencers. Is that right?
Yes.
I don't want to sort of do a progress report on it, because this could be seen in context, a year or two or whatever later. Where's that going? And you've got some pretty cool other people involved there. I mean, how's that? I know there's a survey going on there, but again, I don't want to stick to a present tense thing necessarily. I mean, how do you see FREE actually pushing this disclosure agenda with new information? And really, it's, I mean, to be fair to the UFO community, it's pretty well stuck in the past. In America, it's stuck in Roswell. In this country, it's pretty well stuck at Bentwaters. There's very little new stuff coming out. There are some very good new groups, Birmingham UFO group, Dave Hodrian and things, people in England pushing the boundaries with good work. Where do you see FREE actually pushing the boundaries as far as information is concerned?
Yeah, FREE is very significant, I believe, because it's focusing more than anything on people's encounters, people's experiences with extraterrestrial beings. So we have quite a number of articles on there about these encounters and experiences. There are articles about physics of the universe and many other subjects that relate to it, but the main focus is for experiencers, giving help to people who have these extraterrestrial encounters. And so hundreds, thousands of people are responding to this particular website and are taking the survey and telling about their experiences. And we do have a committee that's been very, very good about collating all this material into different subject matters, different aspects of it. So anybody who is experiencing extraterrestrial encounters, or even seriously wonders if that's what's happening to them, they can go to this website and FREE, FREE, and I believe the website is experiencer.org. www.
I'll put that up on the screen, and people can go to that and give their experiences. And certainly I do my own little bit with what I call basis witness statements, which is a carryover from the Amash witness statements, just getting people's witnesses, whatever their experience is, just get it recorded, and we'll figure out the veracity of it, whatever it is later. But Barbara Lamb, this is really good to see you again. I look forward to seeing you again. In the meantime, we're hotter as hell here in Wiltshire with the crop circles. We've got some nice new ones. Not able to see you here. I really enjoyed our time at Well Cottage. That was wonderful with Sean Randall. Is it Sean? Shauna?
Sean.
Yeah, Sean. Wonderful lady, wonderful woman. Is she coming over this year as well?
She is. She's coming over late July, early August. Yes.
Okay, well, the dinger's dinging and the time's running out. Thank you so much, Barbara Lamb, and until next time.
Thank you too, Miles. Great pleasure.